My F48 sister and I F32 aren't blood related. My mom met who will be calling my dad for the rest of this post when I was 1 year out. They dated for a few years and my dad stayed in my life after that. My sis and I were close for a long time, even lived with her for a while. In 2016, my dad went to the hospital for a surgery and had some complications which paralyzed him on his left side, and the doctors said the right side of his brain had low activity. He was in the ICU with a tube in his throat. He couldn't talk or move. I moved close to the hospital he was in. I could go see him often since my sis was living far. I stopped working to see him more. After a week or two, I realized I wouldn't be able to pay my rent. Found out a work colleague was a sex worker. Started working with her for 2-3 months until I couldn't do it anymore. When I started sex work, I started to go see my father less and less, and every time I'd go, he'd be worse looking each time. It was my first time seeing someone dying slowly like this. My sis tried to convince me to go see him more, then started being more angry, telling me she's the one who's always at his bedside, and when she's not there, heads alone because of me. Still didn't go, out of sight, out of mind or something. One morning, she left me a voicemail saying I was the worst person ever for abandoning him and that he's angry at me and never deserved his love. After 6 months in the ICU, she decided to unplug him. It was rough and I fell into a deep, long and hard depression, since on top of that I was in an abusive relationship with a narcissist. After I tried to keep in touch with her, it was hard with depression and the abuse and made it so I pushed everyone out of my life. I dodged her calls and texts, answering once in a while. After my breakup, I tried to explain that to my sister, but she didn't understand that after 4 years I was still depressed and grieving. Every time I would ignore her messages, she would blow up on me, telling me I'm a shit sis and I ought to be over dad's death by now, and to never call her again cause him out of her life. It made it so I would get anxious seeing her name. At some point I realized that my anxiety was from the trauma of her reaction when dad was in ICU. I told her and she apologized. We only talked about it once, but she said she was under a lot of stress and pain too. Since she's his blood, all the paperwork and decision making fell on her. It's been years now and I still get anxious when she messages me. The last few times I saw her I was uncomfortable and anxious. Now what to do, how to explain this without hurting her. I feel like a boss. I feel like I'm disappointing my dad. I'm worried he would be angry at me for being so uncaring towards her. I feel like all I do is hurting her. She is the only link to dad. She inherited everything of him, which I don't care, but if I stop talking to her I won't be able to go see him, his ashes.